Hey guys, Foxdrop here with another patch breakdown video. This is patch 3.10a. Presumably there's going to be a 3.10b as well later on, but this is just 3.10a. I'm going to go through the changes with you. I'm going to be focusing on the jungle changes, but I will glance over all of the changes for you. So yeah, let's get this video underway. So the first change I've done is with LeBlanc. Oh sorry, I recently released a LeBlanc video, and like half the comments were just like people taking a mick out of how I said LeBlanc, so I don't know how to satisfy you guys unless I start talking in my French accent, and I ain't gonna do that for you because I'll probably just humiliate myself. I'd rather say it wrong than whip out my old French accent, so I'm gonna continue to say it wrong for you and roll with the punches. So with LeBlanc, a new changes. What they've done is they have increased her base health regeneration by quite a lot. It's almost 50% as well, to 7 from 5, which is nice because she does take quite a lot of damage because she's always in the enemy's faces. And they've increased her attack damage per level as well, just so, which is a nice change in general because it means she can now last hit a tiny bit better. Not too much of a change, but a tiny bit more, and also harass slightly better as well. The basic attacks. Because her basic attack is actually quite nice for harassing in lane. The range isn't amazing, but it's also really not that bad either, so that's not too bad. And I quite like the way they synergize with each other, health regen and the increased attack damage, because what that means, the increased attack damage basically is now going to incentivize you to be basic attack poking the enemy laner. And when you do that, you draw minion aggro, and so if minions are hitting you, you're going to be taking some damage, obviously. And so that base health regen is just going to, mean so that when you do take extra damage from that, you are regenerating it faster. So moving on to Master Yi. Now this is quite a big one because Yi was reworked recently. I did a video on him, and it's pretty common knowledge that he's broken and pretty overpowered at the same time. So they needed to do something about him, and I had a quick read over these changes, and I think these aren't too bad personally, but it's hard to say what these changes really mean, as in how they're going to impact his play. So the links to these patch notes as always will be in the description, so you can read them for yourself, because I won't be reading everything out for you. But so to basically what they've changed, they've reduced his attack speed per level by quite a lot. I looked at this and I thought, blimey, this is a lot of attack speed reduction, considering he's like auto attack reliant, mostly auto attack reliant. That is kind of it looks like a lot when I look at it on paper, because if you consider that if you're leveling it up 18 times, maybe 17 times, I don't know, you're leveling up a lot of times, and so being reduced by 0.75 each time is like almost, it's around over 10% less attack speed Master Yi has later on in the game than he would have had before this patch. So that is quite a lot. 10% attack speed is quite a lot. It's not a huge amount, but it's definitely noticeable, I think. But to be honest, I think that's probably a nice change, because that doesn't really nerf him too much in the early stages of the game, in my opinion. And his late game was really where his powerhouse nature shone through. So they've done that, and they fixed the bug with double strike and with meditate. So the damage reduction is, it says here increased at later ranks, when it's increased at every single rank by the same amount. Yeah, I'm not going crazy. That is actually what's happened. Okay, so they've increased meditate's damage reduction by 10%. So I don't know why they said they just increased it at later ranks when it's all the same, but that's probably, it's either poor wording, or what they mean by it is because it's a percentage. And because later on, if someone does like 1,000 damage to you and you block 70% of that, then that is, you're blocking 700 damage. But if, early game, that change doesn't mean as much because people aren't doing as much damage to you. So if you block 70% of 100 damage, for example, obviously you're not going to have meditate at rank 5 when people are doing 100 damage to you, but still you get the idea. So that's what I think, that's what right we're going for. But either way, so they've just increased his meditate, which I think is kind of nice, because his W may as well not exist with Master Yi, to be honest. So it's nice, actually. It's a good skill. I'm not saying it's bad by any means, but it wasn't what was making Master Yi like OP. So I think, and people weren't even using it properly. Like, they weren't even thinking about when to use their meditate. They didn't have to think about when to use their meditate because they didn't really need to. They just ran around and face rolled everyone. So I think by putting more importance onto that ability, that might, you know, that's better in my opinion. Now this would you style, people said this to me when they were like, what do you think of the Master Yi changes, Foxdrop? When people went on my Facebook, which you can go to my Facebook if you want to, like, you know, get involved in some conversations with me, discussions with me. They asked me, you know, what do you think about Master Yi's nerfs? Because they've actually buffed him early game. They've increased the bonus damage on his passive, on his Wuju style, from, you know, 7, 9, 11, 13, 15 to 10% at all ranks. So that's actually a buff early game, and he didn't really need that buff early game, did he? So what do I think of it? And in my opinion, even though this looks like it's... Obviously you can tell that later on, at rank 5, it used to give 15%, and the new 10% is a 5% difference. And at rank 1, it used to give 7% and now gives a 10%, so that's only a 3% difference. So already on paper you can see how it's more of a nerf to the late game. But when you actually think about this, there's a very important thing you have to think about whenever percentages come into play. Percentages are more important and more powerful late game than they are early game, because you're doing more damage late game than you are doing early game. So say for example, you know, well, it's like the meditate example I use. Like later on, someone can do 1,000 damage, and so if you have like, you know, 1,000 bonus AD, which you're not gonna have, but say you did have 1,000 bonus AD, then you would be getting what, 150 extra AD if you were with the old Wuju style late game. And whereas now, and say early game you only had like 100 bonus AD, these numbers are completely made up and make no sense whatsoever. If you're at 10%, you're only going to get 10 bonus AD. So early on, percentages really don't mean that much. So although his percentages have been increased, so it's been increased from 7% to 10%, it doesn't, that as a number really doesn't mean too much. It's probably only going to be an increase of like 5 AD at the most, to be honest, early game. It depends how you build him though, to be honest as well. I personally didn't even build Master Yi with a lot of AD early. I just stockpiled it later on. I'm not saying that's the way you should build him, but that's just what I used to do, because I used to get Blade of the Ruined King and static Shiv. And then I used to get like an Infinity Edge or something later on. But so yeah, that I don't really think people were like, oh, this buff is early game, but I personally don't really think that actually really means anything, to be perfectly honest. I think this is just a pretty big hit to his late game, which is similar to what his attack speed per level has done. And now with his Highlander, I think this is really the big change, or the biggest change, because it's more like a concept change rather than just like a numbers change. Now passively reduces the remaining cooldown for Master Yi's basic abilities by 70% on a kill or assist, instead of 18 seconds on a kill or 9 on an assist. So if these work, I'm not quite sure how this works. If it's like base 70%, so say if you get 2 resets, then it reduces by 70%, which is 140%, i.e. the cooldown comes back up again. I don't know whether it works like that, or whether it works as in it's reduced by 70%, and then it's reduced by another 70%, and so each time you reduce it by 70%, you're not actually getting a flat reduction to 0 cooldown. You know, you're not getting the cooldown refreshed exactly, you're just reducing the cooldown by each time. I'm not quite sure how that works out, but you know, practically that doesn't really matter too much. But I like that change because I think that's, you know, the 18 seconds meant that all of your abilities came back up again if you got a kill. And now it's not so much that. And they even say in the description they wanted to stop people just like smartly chaining together Alpha Strike, like Alpha Strike, Alpha Strike, Alpha Strike, Alpha Strike, because they kept getting resets. So I think that's kind of cool. I think this is a necessary change. In all honesty, there are a few raised eyebrows as far as Riot's balancing has gone in Season 3, at least that's my personal opinion, is a few raised eyebrows. I'm not saying that you know, horrible at balancing, but just some things I haven't necessarily agreed with too much. They do well for the most part though. And this one is an example, in my opinion, of something which has worked pretty well. I think this is a nice change, but again, it's hard to say. It's hard to say without actually being in the game and seeing it happen over a few weeks as to really the impact of these changes. And moving on to Riven, basically the summary, Riven can now leap over walls with the 3rd hit of Broken Wings. Okay, so this one is fairly interesting because this was something which was like a semi-bug which would happen where your broken wings, sorry, you could do that at certain walls, certain places, and you would hop over them, and it was like a kind of like a bug, but not really a bug, but kind of a bug, and still really hard to execute. It wasn't really part of a playstyle because you could never reliably do it. It was something that only experienced Riven players probably even knew about. And even then, you'd had like a 50-50 chance of pulling it off. So it's not like you could be like, oh yeah, I'll do this play and then jump over the wall, because you didn't plan around it. It was just something which you could sometimes pull off. Now they've actually made it part of their kit. And this is quite interesting. There was a post on Reddit about this, and I thought this summarized it pretty nicely actually. Some guy said that basically this now makes it different for the new Riven players now that they've added this into a kit, and his worry was that if Riven now becomes OP because she can jump over walls, which is what she could already do before, but unreliably so, then if this pushes her over the top, then they're going to have to nerf her and put her back into not so strong. And because now that instead of like removing the ability to jump over walls, which is basically what Riven was like in the past, where she couldn't, that she may as well not been able to jump over walls because it was so unreliable. Instead of just removing it and leaving her balanced as she was, they will nerf her as a character to compensate for the fact that she can also jump over walls. And this guy was expressing his dismay at the fact that Riot might do that, and how that will probably ruin Riven a little bit for him at least, and just Riven in general. And it actually says, like, that guy hit the nail on the head. It says here, this change promotes Riven's high mobility playstyle and skirmish play pattern, so we'll balance around it rather than simply remove the change if it affects her power significantly. So I'm personally like, I don't know, like I don't know how strong she will be, and if she is too strong, then they're gonna have to nerf her. And I don't really think that Riven needed nerfs. Riven was always one of those characters who was like a very solid solo queue pick, because no one ever banned her, no one like really first picked her, but anytime you picked Riven, you could have a really good game, and you could carry Riven really easily, despite the fact that she wasn't ban worthy. She wasn't considered overpowered, but she was always a very stable champion for solo queue. So hopefully they don't nerf her too much. And as far as jungling goes, this is probably this makes her very interesting, because she can now bypass certain ward spots, especially if she can jump from let's see, if you are blue side, so on the left side, if you jump from around red buff over the dragon wall, so you jump from if you jump over the dragon wall from red buff, you can actually avoid the ward in Tribush. That's a pretty good, so people who can jump over walls, that's always a good way to, like, a sneaky way to be ganking. So you can do that, and if Riven can do that, then that might make her jungling quite interesting. Anywho, moving on to Shen. Basically, Shen is really OP in the competitive scene, most noticeably the Korean competitive scene. Very strong Korean competitive scene. They use Shen slightly different to how the Westerners use Shen, the Europeans and North Americans. Because what they do, what I've personally noticed, how they use Shen, they don't use him reactively. They don't use Shen as a shield. I mean, sometimes they do, but mostly what they do, they use him as an engage. They'll stick Shen on someone who's engaging, and then he will appear, as the play is starting, and then he's there, and like they'll combo him with something. So like Jarvan will get a Shen shield and then EQ into the team and Cataclysm, and then Shen will lock them all up or something like that. That's what Shen will do. It's not like they'll be fighting and then suddenly when they need Shen, they're like, oh, Shen ult, and Shen will ult and join the fight. It's not really like that. And when he's used that way, proactively as opposed to reactively, he's actually really strong at starting these engages and making plays. So they've nerfed him. Basically, they've nerfed his shield amount because he was just really tanky anyway. He would just sit in top lane and safe farm. He didn't need to pressure anyone because he could just use his ult, and that was his pressure. He didn't need to have any lane pressure whatsoever. And the fact that he was so tanky actually gave him a lot of lane pressure. So they removed that. Well, haven't removed that at all. Sorry, they've nerfed that slightly, which I think is good. I think that's worthwhile. And now you can actually interrupt Shen's ulti with a root effect. And I honestly think that's, I think that's a good change. I like that change, but I'm not necessarily sure if it means too much. I mean, think about it this way. TF, he can't ult when he is rooted. TF and Shen are very similar ults to the extent where they're, teleport ults. So if you think about how strong TF is, even though he can be interrupted with roots, I don't really think that will make too much of a difference for Shen. I think this is just a necessary change which should have happened, but I don't think it'll mean too much. I mean, off the top of my head, there aren't that many people who play top lane who have roots. I mean, the only one I can really think of is Ryze with his W. But he actually got nerfed quite hard, like nerfed into oblivion last patch. So I'm not too sure if we'll see too much of him. But I mean, there aren't really that many roots, and especially even less when you consider those that are actually going into the top lane. But yeah, so that's Shen's change. As far as jungling goes, it's not a big difference. The shield amount is annoying, but it's not that much. But yeah, Twitch has had his laning reduced so much slightly by reducing the base damage of his expunge. Because what he used to do is he used to throw his W on someone and then basic attack them and expunge them, and that would be a nice combo for at least a third of an AD carry's health, which is quite a lot considering he didn't have to do anything for it. Sometimes even people would throw their W at you and then just expunge immediately, just like that, and that was their harass, and that was actually not too bad for harass. So apart from the fact that would used to cost a lot of mana, it wasn't too bad. So I'm glad they've reduced these base damage because it was a bit too much. You actually have to have more poison stacks now for expunge to be useful, so I quite like that. Anyway, Zac is like a big issue as well now, especially in the competitive scene, most noticeably the Korean scene. They've always used Zac a lot, and the last patch that brought in Spirit Visage, like the new Spirit Visage, which is just dumb as hell and broken and OP and ridiculous. Zac has gone way over the top and way too strong. And so they've changed them here, basically. What they've done, I don't think this is enough, but I think it's a step in the right direction. Basically, now, to pick up your blobs, the range of them, the radius of them has been decreased to a quarter of what they used to be. So your blobs aren't as big anymore, so you actually have to deliberately walk on them to regen health. And because Zac got so big because of his, he increased his size, how much health he has, he used to pick up blobs, like, it even says here, he used to pick up blobs, like, unintentionally. He wouldn't even mean to pick up blobs, so he didn't have to go out of his way to do it. So now he actually does have to go out of his way, so he should be regenning a lot less. And also his ultimate Let's Bounce no longer grants him any tenacity, so he can, which I think is good. Like, the fact that he got tenacity from that is a bit stupid, because he could elastic slingshot into enemies from miles away, pop his ulti, and then, your high value targets like your AD carry were screwed, because you couldn't do anything. You couldn't do anything to stop him, because he came in from miles away and then he was stuck on you. You couldn't get rid of him. At least now with Let's Bounce removing the tenacity, you can't stop him from jumping on you because his range is too much. You won't see him come in. That itself is hard to stop. But now that he can be stopped in his ultimate, in his blobby bouncing form, that is good. That stops the pressure and makes team fighting a little bit easier versus Zac, which I think is nice. I think that's a good change. But I also think that he is just still a bit too strong. Although, having said that, they do nerf Spirit Visage in this patch too, and so that indirectly nerfs Zac. Anyway, so moving on to the items. Cutlass has had its range reduced, which I don't really know what to think about this, because I don't really think it's necessary. Like, Cutlass's range was already extremely short, like pretty much like a half a range basic attack range. And now they've reduced it even more. I don't really know why they necessarily needed to do that. Although I don't know. But Blade of the Ruin King has had its range removed as well, which I like this change, because it was too much for like someone like Vayne or something who would basic attack you and then Blade of the Ruin King you as they were basic attack you, pretty much anyway, and then you couldn't get away from them. Like, that was it. You were screwed. As soon as they hit you, they didn't even need to like get close to you. They would find you slightly out of position, catch up to you, Blade of the Ruin King you, and then that was it. Sayonara, you're gone. So I like that. And also they've increased the cooldown on it to 1.5 minutes from 1 minute, which is a lot, actually. This is a lot of change. But again, probably necessary, which is a real shame, because I built Blade of the Ruin King on a lot of people, and this nerf, in my opinion, is aimed towards the AD carries who are using it and who are too strong with it. So, I don't know. It's a shame, because I used to build it on like Shaco and Master Yi and a lot of my junglers who I would go kind of bruiser assassins to an extent. And it wasn't overpowered on them by any means. So it's a shame to see it nerfed, but it was too strong on certain AD carries. So things are bug lock here. Spirit Visage now costs more gold. One of the reasons why Spirit Visage was so strong was because it was so gold efficient. You didn't have to spend a lot of gold compared to the stats that you were receiving. So the fact that now it costs slightly more gold is good, but it costs 125 more gold. Really, 125 gold? It's really not that much. That's like a minion wave's worth. And, you know, it's a nerf, but I don't really think that matters too much. I think it's still too strong. They should probably reduce like the regen on it or something. The reason why it got buffed in the first place was because Bulwark got nerfed in replace for, like, Bulwark was like an AoE MR item, and they got rid of it with the intention that you didn't just have to buy lock here and then you'd have enough like AoE, your team would have quite a lot of MR. You'd actually have to buy more personal MR items if you wanted to counter magic damage. So they made things like Spirit Visage stronger, and having in the process of doing that, they actually kind of, in my opinion, made it too strong. They made it too gold effective. Now Phage and Trinity have Phage has been changed. Basically now, instead of having a chance to slow the enemy, it actually gives you increased movement speed for a few seconds. Whenever you hit something, you get 20 move speed for 2 seconds, and whenever you kill something, you get 60 move speed for 2 seconds. Which I actually kind of like this change, although I'm a bit worried. Excuse me, I'm a bit worried about the Phage and Frozen Mallet combination. That might be pretty crazy. If you perma slowing them and then perma speed boosting yourself, that may be pretty insane. But Triforce has been buffed. This is actually quite a huge buff. They increased the Sheen damage on it to 200% from 150%, and it always works off your base AD. So this is actually quite a lot. That makes it do even more damage, and of course, you know, it gets the removes the icy passive and gives you the speed boost. Frozen Mallet's recipe has been changed, and just some, you know, random stuff which doesn't really matter. So there you go. They're all the patch notes. This video has actually gone on quite a while, so I apologise for that. Yeah, there wasn't actually that many changes. I just babbled on for a huge amount of time, so I apologise. Hopefully you still find it useful though. These videos are kind of intended to be more like, you know, you don't have to watch anything. You're just listening to me talk, so you can have them on in the background while you're like eating your cereal or something, and doing your other random stuff, or just skip to the part you want to hear about. I don't know, whatever. But anyway, thanks for watching the video, guys. I hope you did like it. You can feel free to come visit me on my Facebook and my Twitter and stuff like that if you want to have some conversations with me, because I, you know, talk to you guys and things like that, which is cool. But anyway, thank you for watching. Enjoy the patch, and I will see you in my next video.